Hi, we're going to continue looking at 4.4, the right triangle. Now, what this video is going to be focusing on is the case 2, which is going to be where one angle and one side length are given to you in the very beginning. And that's going to look very similar down here by example 2. You can notice that you're given a side length, and now we are given an angle. You can tell the difference between the capital and the lowercase letters. So just to review, we're going to look at the right triangle up here in the corner. We know our capital letters are always represented by the angles, so angle A, angle B, and angle C. Angle C is always going to be the right angle. Now, the lowercase letters of the sides that correspond with the capital letters. For example, side A is opposite of angle A. Side B, which is down here, would be opposite of angle B. Side C is always going to be the hypotenuse, which is across from angle C. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our first example. So example 2, we are being given little c and angle A. So what I would like you to do first is pause the video, draw your triangle, label everything, and get it all set up so we can get started. Okay, so this is all you should have done so far, is I have my right triangle drawn, I know my right angle, I know little c is 21, so that's going to be the hypotenuse across from that. If we need to, the hypotenuse will always be this side, so you can even write that in there. That's going to be the hypotenuse. And then we also marked that angle A was 27 degrees. You can see on the right here, I listed out side ABC and angle ABC. And I filled in what we know. We know C is always going to be 90 degrees. The problem tells us A is 27 degrees and little c is 21. Now, before we move forward, let's talk about what our rounding is going to be like. Since we noticed that this side length has 2 sig digs, that tells us we're going to round to the nearest whole degree, which is what angle A is rounded to. So angle A and B will be both rounded to the nearest whole degree, and side ABC should all have 2 sig digs in there. C is going to be the only exception here because we're just going to leave that at 90 degrees. Okay, so now what we can do is go ahead and look at the 3 steps up above. Step 1 is going to find the third angle using complementary angles or triangle sum, meaning that if we know this angle of C is 90 degrees, that means A and B have to be 90 degrees. So we can take 90 minus 27, and that'll tell us the measure of angle B. So let's do that first. So we can say the measure of angle B is equal to 90 degrees minus 27 degrees. And when we do 90 minus 27, we see we get an answer of 63 degrees. So measure of angle B is 63 degrees. And like we also said in the previous video, if you add angle A and B, you should always get 90 degrees there. So now what we have to do is we need to find the measure of angle, or I'm sorry, the measure of side B and the measure of side A. So we have to approach this problem a little bit differently. We're going to use our trig functions to find those sides. Well, keep in mind, let's review, we use the trig functions with the acronym SO, CA, TOA. This helps us identify which trig function we have to use. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with side A, which means we want to find this side right over here. So we're finding side A. We have to use this angle that was given to us as our starting point, if you will. So we want to use this angle here. So side A would be opposite of this angle, and we have the hypotenuse. So go back up to the top here. Opposite and hypotenuse would be sine, because that has the O and the H with it. So now instead of writing sine of A like we did in the previous video, we're going to write sine of 27 degrees since we know that angle measure is equal to the opposite, which is going to be little a, over our hypotenuse, which is 21. Now we need to solve for a. We can think of this as a couple different ways. We could set up a proportion here, and now we can cross multiply. So 1 times a is going to be a, and then we have to take 21 times sine of 27 degrees. And then we can just take this expression on the right here and type it into your calculator. So 21 times sine of 27. And we're getting an answer of 9.5338 and so forth. We said we want 2 sig digs like side C, so we know little a is going to be equal to 9, oops, that's not a 9, to 9.5, and that would be our little a. So now what we have to do, we found our little a, now we need to find our little b. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, figure out which trig function we need to use, and see if you can find that side. Okay, so for this one, we used cosine of 27 degrees. That's equal to b over 21. Cross multiply 1 times b is b. Then we take the 21 times cosine of 27. We get 18.711, which rounds to 19. So the reason why we used cosine is so we want to find this side right here. This side would be adjacent to that angle that we know. So if we know the adjacent side and the hypotenuse, we come up to the top here, adjacent and hypotenuse, A and H is next to the C, which means we want to use cosine. Cosine of 27 degrees equals B over 21. Okay, let's move on to the next page. Okay, so we did a couple of these examples in the previous video. We see example 3, we have a side and a side. So this was case 1. That was one of the ones we looked at yesterday. And we see example 4, we have a side and an angle. So we know this would be case 2, like we looked at today. So now what I want you to do first is pause the video, set up your triangle, label everything, and fill in what we know. Okay, so I have my triangle, I have my right angle, I know angle A is 18.4 degrees, and again we know our hypotenuse, which is 0.0897. And then I filled in what I know over here. Now, we know that since there's 3 sig digs in this side, and we're rounding to the nearest tenth, because that's from the chart in the previous section, we know A and B both have to be rounded to the nearest tenth, and then we know A, B, and C, the sides, all have to have 3 sig digs. We're not concerned with angle C since we know it's 90 degrees. So now, what I want you to do first is going to be step 1, which means we want to find the measure of angle B. So go ahead, pause the video, and find the measure of angle B first. When we do this, we take the measure of angle B, so we do 90 degrees minus 18.4, which is equal to 76.1 degrees. And there we have all 3 angles found. So now next thing we need to do, we need to find side A and side B. Let's start with side A. So what I want you to do first is at least set up using the trig function the equation you have to use to find side A. Okay, so since side A would be over here, this is opposite of the angle that we are given. So if we have opposite and the hypotenuse, opposite and hypotenuse, O and H, go with sine. So we have sine of 18.4 degrees equals A over the 0.0897. So now we want to solve for A. So go ahead again, pause the video, set up your proportion, and find the length of side A, rounding appropriately. For this one, after we cross multiply, and we get a final answer of 0.0283. Okay, now go ahead, pause the video again, and I want you to find what let's use the yellow again, find side B. This time we have to use cosine because side B would be here, which is adjacent to this angle. Adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So use cosine of 18.4 equals B over 0.0897. So now again, pause the video, cross multiply, find your B, rounding appropriately. Okay, and when we solve this, we're finding little b is equal to 0.0851. We fill that in there. Again, all 3 sides have 3 sig digs. And another thing you can do too is we should always know the hypotenuse should be the longest side. So letter C here for the side should always be bigger than your A and your B, which you can see here they are. Okay, when we look at example 5, we see a little a and a little c being given to us, which means that's 2 sides. So this was case 1, this was one that was done in the previous video. Now when we look at example 6, we see here that we are being given a side and an angle. So this would be case 2 because we have a side and an angle being given to us. What I want you to do, just like before, pause the video, get your triangle all set up, and write down everything we know so far. Okay, so we have our triangle. I have it labeled A, B, and C, just like I label all of them. We know angle C is our right angle. I know side B, which is 45.32. Opposite that is angle B, which is 15.80 degrees. Looking at our rounding, we can see that our side has 4 sig digs, and when you have 4 sig digs, we know that we round to the nearest hundredths place, which is what our angle already is. So what I want you to do is I want you to first find angle A. To find this, we have to subtract the 15.80 from 90 to get 74.2. But we want to make sure that we round it to the nearest hundredths place, so we're going to add a 0 onto that. So 74.20. And again, if you add these two up, you will get 90 degrees. So now we're left with having to find side A, which would be over here, and side C, which would be the hypotenuse. It does not matter which one you start with. I typically go alphabetical, so I'm going to start with side A, which is going to be this side over here. So now this one's going to be set up a tad bit differently because we're going to run into a situation that we haven't seen yet. So when we have to find this side, again, we always want to start from the angle that's being given to us. We know this side over here is opposite, so the side that we're looking for would be adjacent. So we have opposite and adjacent, which tells us opposite and adjacent would be the O and the A, which would be our tangent. So we need to use tangent here of this 15.80 degrees. Now tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. So opposite of angle B is 45.32 over the adjacent, which is side A, which we're looking for. Now, we're going to have to take a little bit different process of solving this because now our variable that we're solving for is in a denominator. But if we keep the same idea of cross multiply to solve, you should be able to get it. So I want you to pause the video, use your cross multiplication, and solve for A, rounding appropriately. Okay, so we have tangent of 15.80 degrees equals the opposite of that, which is 45.32, divided by the adjacent, which is side A. So we cross multiply. So I do A times 15.80 degrees equals 1 times 45.32, which is that. To solve for A, we have to take this and divide it by this. So 45.32 divided by tangent 15.80, we're getting 160.157, which would round to 160.2, which is our 4 sig digs. So now I want you to find side C, which would be our hypotenuse. So pause the video and then you'll have to determine which trig function to use, and then I want you to go through the process of solving it to find your letter C. Okay, so this time when we're coming from angle B, 45.32 is the opposite of that. So we have the opposite, and then we're trying to find the hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse, well, that would be sine because it's O and H. So sine of our angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. And then we cross multiply to get an answer of 166, and it comes out to be 0.446, which would round to 166.4. So there we have all three side lengths to 4 sig digs. We found our two angle measures to the nearest hundredth degree. Okay, well that's all we have for 4.4. So 4.4, there's two cases. One, you are given two sides in the beginning. The other case, you are given one side and one angle. So now try the second part of the homework out and reach out if you have any questions. Bye.